Well, fight fans, we have finally reached the finish line, and what a finish line it is. December 12th, 2015, a date we will not soon forget in the sport of mixed martial arts. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to our final video from here in Las Vegas. The UFC 194 post-fight press conference has just wrapped up. I'm Ariel Helwani. That is Shaun Al-Shatti. That is the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. And what a night this turned out to be. Conor McGregor is the undisputed UFC featherweight champion. He knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. In the end, it really just took one punch, as he predicted. Also in the co-main event, Luke Rockhold defeated Chris Weidman. He is the new undisputed UFC middleweight champion. Wow, what can you say about all this? Chuck, let's start with you. What shocks you more? Because they're both kind of shocking results, right? The fact that Luke Rockhold completely annihilated Chris Weidman en route to becoming the champion, or the fact that Conor McGregor defeated Jose Aldo in just 13 seconds?
10 years of a legacy, 13 seconds. 33 fights through this whole weekend, 13 seconds. Kind of crazy. I did not see that coming. We could talk about the Rockhold thing. We knew, though, he had the talent. We hadn't seen Weidman dominated that way before. That's why that's surprising. But come on, 13 seconds in a big fight that has had this much buildup, and it was going to, this Jose Aldo, and just so much. We talked about how confident he looked all week, just that he was over it. And for him to just throw one punch and knock him out, it was pretty crazy. I was actually in the stands in auxiliary seating for this one, and there was beer flying. There were people swinging on these cables and people running over the aisles and stuff. I mean, I've never seen pandemonium like that, and for good reason. When we talk about Mystic Mac, that's the type of thing that makes him Mystic Mac. I mean, he called the shots, and he basically went in there and did it. That was pretty crazy.
Shaun, let me ask you the exact same question. What's the more shocking result?
I mean, he called his shot. That's really what it is. How many times have we done this now? In July, we were sitting here saying he said he was going to knock Chad Mendes out in the second round. He did it. He called his shot 13 seconds. He knocked out the greatest featherweight who ever lived in our sport, who ruled for 10 years, in 13 seconds. He defeated Jose Aldo in a manner that an immediate rematch doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Like, that's something that personally didn't even fathom could happen. Like, I don't know, man. That was just crazy. Like, my head is still swimming from that.
You were in attendance.
Yeah.
What was the scene like? And was it the same as 189? Because that obviously went longer. This kind of felt like for a second we were all just stunned.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. It's one of those things where you look up from your computer, the fight starts, and then it's over. And you look around to the people around you, and you're like kind of asking for them to confirm to you that that's exactly what just happened. What you think you saw is actually what happened. And I'm looking around in the stands, and it's not even celebration at that point. Everybody's just kind of like, it was a remarkable sight. And then it was just utter pandemonium. Like Chuck said, there was just people flying everywhere, people just beer throwing, massive celebration. I kind of like went up to the swarm of Irishmen and followed them throughout the exit to the MGM Grand, the arena, and it was just like a party. Like, it was just a massive party. I kept taking videos of it. It was nuts.
I was going to say that coming into this post-fight presser, Sean Shelby, the matchmaker, came in and he was like, he just flashed a big smile. He's like, I'm still waiting for the fight to start. And that's sort of why it was so shocking. I think a lot of us thought you're going to see him at least, exchange. We're talking about all the stylistic matchups, how they handle space, the leg kicks, we didn't see any of that. So you just see a guy who just goes down and there's this huge release, because I think there was genuine fear with the Irish fans. I mean, I think they want to be reassured that their guy had a chance in this fight. For him to do what he did that fast validates an entire nation that came out here to watch this fight. Just a crazy scenario.
Well, let me ask you this. This was without a doubt one of the most anticipated fights in UFC history, right? Do you feel satisfied? As a fan, as a consumer, do you feel like you got the payoff that we had been waiting for?
Yeah, I do. Personally, I do.
Explain why.
Well, we know that these scenarios can happen. It's still a release. Like these types of things, like you're never sure what you're going to get. But in this case, I mean, Conor McGregor, the amount of talk and the amount of visualization, all the things we've been talking about, like him being as bombastic as he wants to be, and then getting this with the Zen phase of his career and all this, you're just interested how he's going to look. For him to go out there and do that, and to have the words to basically say, that precision beats, this speed or whatever he was saying afterwards. I mean, it's all true for him. He's actualizing what he's thinking, and I mean, to me, that's a big relief. Now, I know they were saying they were trending towards the biggest numbers in company history, pay-per-view wise, and in the business aspect. So Does everybody feel that way? I don't know. But I felt like I didn't see anybody complaining about this. This was one of those things that it wasn't like he just caught him. I think they got into an exchange and he was just superior in that one exchange and told the whole story.
Yeah, and there's certainly no controversy here. I mean, that was a clean finish. It was the right call. Let me ask you this. We were kind of debating this all week long. A loss to Conor McGregor for Jose Aldo, who had been so dominant, and you really chronicled his journey and his dominance as well as anyone has ever done before. Does this taint it all? Do we now look back on Jose Aldo's career and say, yeah, but when it all counted, you lost to the guy that called you out more than anyone?
I don't know if it taints it, because, I mean, 10 years is still 10 years, but it certainly makes it look way, way different, doesn't it? Like, nobody is ever going to look at Jose Aldo the same way again, and it really speaks to just the brutality of this sport. Things can change so fast. I mean, there's a picture circulating of Jose Aldo afterwards in his locker room, and it's the emotions of involved in this sport, how quickly things can change just for your entire life, change in 13 seconds. It's a cats and Gano thing. It's one of those things of what just happened. There was one exchange, and then he got knocked out in the second exchange. It was, my head is swimming. It's so crazy. Of all the different scenarios that were laid out, I don't think anybody anticipated a 13-second knockout. I mean, is this the fastest in UFC history?
It is the fastest. The fastest finish in UFC title history. It beats out Ronda Rousey over Kat Zingano earlier this year. What a crazy year it has been, by just 1 second. So now Conor McGregor says, I love options. And this man creates options for himself better than anyone in the sport. We remember that Go Big press conference in September. He started 4 new feuds in the span of 10 minutes. So these are his options right now. He can obviously stay at 145 and fight Aldo again. He could fight Frankie Edgar, who 24 hours ago was celebrating the fact that he's the #1 contender. Who knows if he's ever going to get that shot against Conor McGregor. He also says he wants to move up to 155, fight the winner of next week's Cerrone Dos Anjos fight, but not vacate the title.
Right.
What's best for business?
Well, what's best for business? I don't know. Well, Conor McGregor right now is big business, so I feel like he can sort of dictate some things. Now, I'm not sure that UFC is going to just create an idea to say, hey, yeah, you can have both belts. I just can't imagine that. In fact, I sort of got conflicting information from about the UFC. I thought they were saying that he would vacate. Dave Schaller was explaining that he would vacate the title right before
That's what they want.
That's what they want. So you can see the inherent conflicts of what they're.
McGregor Promotions says otherwise.
Well, he's going to think about it during Christmas, and we'll get back. But
some eggnog.
With some eggnog. But I personally think, I mean, you get Frankie Edgar, who did what he did last night, and he goes in there and just puts on that performance, and everybody was already kind of want to see that fight anyway. He put the stamp on it and gets the knockout, and then you get this tonight. I feel like that has to be the fight. Now, obviously, there's probably some kind of circumstance there where his weight cut maybe wasn't as easy as I thought we all kind of saw him on the scale. He looked a little drawn out and stuff, but maybe his weight cut was just too much this time. They don't want to do it again. Who knows? But in my mind, I would like to see that. If Cowboy Cerrone wins next week, given their feud, I don't know, man. But I would still lean towards Edgar at this point.
What do you want to see?
I mean, the Edgar fight is absolutely the fight I'd love to see, but I don't think it's going to happen at this point. It seems like Conor, more so than anybody else, he's one of, maybe, perhaps, and I mean, not even perhaps, he is the smartest fighter I've ever seen in mixed martial arts, just in terms of navigating, like, the business aspect of this. He's fully able to dictate his own terms at this point, and he seems dead set on wanting to go to 155 and, try to do this 2-division thing. Will the UFC let him? I don't know, but it's the relationship between Conor McGregor and the UFC going forward is going to be a really interesting story to watch, because you even saw hints of it at the end of that presser where somebody asked him, can you kind of force your own way into Krug Park? And he said, maybe I can these days. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
And more to that point, I asked him afterwards, how's the relationship? And he alluded to the fact that it isn't great. I mean, he said not that long ago that he wanted a 9-figure contract. He did say he recently signed a new contract, but he wondered out loud if it's already outdated, because he just scored a $10.1 million gate in a pretty small arena, number 2 to UFC 129, which had 55,000 people in the arena, right? I mean, it's amazing how he can really dictate those terms. You have to feel for Frankie Edgar, though. It seems like he can't get that opportunity. Personally, I would love to see that fight happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up. But then the war begins. Does he vacate the title? Does he not? What a fascinating story this is, right?
Cowboy Cerrone wins next week and he does it emphatically or whatever. I have a feeling that people are going to want to clamor for. You know how this sport goes. It's like whatever just happened. They're like, oh my God. And then those guys already have this little feud going on. You probably get Cowboy then kind of shooting back at him. Who knows? But it's a crazy sort of scenario because I feel like he can sort of trump everybody's spot at this point, and that's got to concern the 155ers like Anthony Pettis and all the other guys who were trying to get the title shot.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. We're going to be in Orlando. This story will linger all the way to that fight. By the way, I just thought of this, and maybe this isn't the best time to do it, but it's pretty obvious, right? Conor McGregor is the fighter of the year. I mean, considering what he did in Boston against Dennis Siver, then July. And you know what's crazy as well? If he fights Edgar and beats him, he will have essentially cleaned out the division
in a year.
And only being undisputed champion in one fight. Yeah. Holloway he beat, Chad Mendes he beat, Jose Aldo. Isn't that crazy?
And 2 years ago when he beat Marcus
Poirier.
2 years ago when he beat Marcus Brimage, what did he say?
Right.
He said, I'm going to come in here, take over this division, and then leave with the belt.
It's unbelievable.
Here's what I hope he never says. Sean, you're going to be out of a job in a week.
Yeah. He really, truly does predict these things. All right, let's move along to the co-main event. We could talk about Conor and Aldo for 45 minutes here, but it is important to note that Luke Rockhold is the new UFC middleweight champion, and you kind of have to feel for him a little bit because, once again, he's being overshadowed. He will have his due, and let's give it to him right now. He annihilated Chris Weidman, and it was a little bit hard to watch because I think Herb Dean was trying to, he was trying to give Chris the benefit of the doubt. He was trying to do him a favor. He was trying to let him fight out of a situation. But, wow, you have to wonder if that's going to come to haunt Chris Weidman. He took some serious damage. I was in the back. I saw him getting carted out on a stretcher. He had a towel over his head, obviously devastated and hurting as well. But do you think in hindsight that Herb Dean should have stopped the fight when he could have? And Luke Rockhold's in mount position just raining down elbows.
He was this close to stopping that fight. I saw him sort of leaning in twice. And the thing that Chris Weidman kept doing when he could was just do this quick pump just to say, like, hey, I'm still fighting, I'm trying to fight. I think that was what sold him on it. Even though as silly as it is, it's not doing anything. It's just saying, like, hey, I'm still here, I'm trying, let me just get through this. I'm not sure if Herb was aware of the time either. That came very late in the round. But it's maybe 20, 25-second mark when he was really wailing on him. I didn't think he'd make it. I thought Herb was going to stop the fight. And in retrospect, he probably should have. That was a pretty big beating.
I also tend to believe that Chris was doing pretty well in the early stages of the fight, but then once he threw that ill-advised spinning wheel kick that it was the beginning of the end, I think back to Chael Sonnen throwing that. Not as bad, but that was really the turning point, right?
For Chris or for Chael?
Well, for both. No, well, not for Chael. That's old news. But for both Chris and Luke Rockhold, after he did that, that's when he got him down, and it was pretty much elementary at that point.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Rockhold was winning that fight up to that point. It seemed like they were both getting a little tired, but absolutely, I mean, that was the turning point.
Did you give Chris the first round?
I did give Chris the first round.
So it was tied going into the third.
Yeah, but I felt like Luke was just
momentum was shifting.
Yeah. But man, you got to wonder, like, that's one of those things. That seemed like one of those type of fights where some guys don't come back from that type of beating. Like, that's a career-changing beating. I only saw the fight live. I didn't see it, with a clock. But it felt like that final third round flurry lasted forever. Like, there were people cage-side just screaming, "Stop the fight!" It was a very bizarre sight because we've never seen Chris Weidman even on his back before. I don't think.
Yeah.
And he was just getting utterly dominated. I personally think that fight should have been stopped right there. I don't think Herb Dean did Chris any favors going forward in the future with that. But I mean, you got to give it to Luke. He called his shot, man. He said the whole week.
It was also, it's his first loss. And you're like, how does he come back from that? A beating, his first loss. He's a psychology major, and he's played very good psychological games with all of his opponents. It will be very interesting to see now that he's on the other side of it, what he does. I really don't think he will get a rematch right away or anything like that. So it's going to be one of those things where he's going to have to live with it for a little while. And it'd be really interesting to see how he does come back. Well,
all he has to do is look at Luke Rockhold, right? How he has responded from that loss to Vitor Belfort. He did so amazingly. Let me ask you this: in the tri-main event, if you will, if you want to call it that, Yoel Romero beat Jacare. So it seems like he's the number one contender. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like Rockhold isn't all that impressed with Romero and doesn't really want that fight. Were you kind of feeling the same thing at the press conference? It felt like he was trying to move away from that fight and get maybe a Vitor Belfort fight.
I think he's just always going to want that Vitor Belfort fight, right? But I mean, at this point, that's the fight they kind of have to make. That was the setup, as this was a little kind of tournament. But I will say that going into this night, I thought any kind of permutation of those 4 guys would be relatively close. I come out of this night thinking that I don't know if Yoel Romero versus Luke Rockhold is that close. I mean, I was very, very impressed with Luke. And we talk about the psychology also of Luke. He was saying the psychology. There were various moments in that fight, because I was cage side, and there were various moments in that fight where the little ticks and the little like facial expressions Luke was making while Chris was fighting, while he was fighting Chris, little smirks and little smiles, and Chris would do something, and Luke would kind of just. It was very subtle, but it seemed like he was so calm and almost playing with him at certain points. It was very interesting to watch. But I mean, going back to the Yoel Romero fight.
Who'd you score for?
I scored it for Jacare. I had a 29-20.
As did I.
But I also wouldn't have disagreed with the tie. I mean, that could be a 10-8 first round. But I mean, Glenn Trowbridge again. We talked about it on, what was it at this point, Thursday?
Yeah.
How are you going to give Rose Namajunas no 10-8s? And then you're going to give a 10-8 there, and it's just like the 29-20 or the 29-27 score. I don't know.
A quick point on Luke. There had been rumblings all week long that he had a really bad training camp. He alluded to that afterwards, that he was on antibiotics up until today for a staph infection, had a litany of injuries, so it really makes his performance all that more impressive. Who do you think won the Jacare Romero fight?
I still thought that Romero won, but I get concerned with his fence grabbing. There's always an asterisk, it seems like, with this guy. Like, in the end, we always have to be like, oh, well, this could have changed everything, you know. And, again, we found ourselves in that position, and they, instead of taking a point or something like that, they just repositioned him. It was a very odd sequence. So I still thought Romero won, though. Ultimately, if it stood the way it went, you know, I thought he won the fight.
Weidman needs some time off. I'd love to see him fight Jacare and then, of course, do the Romero-Rockhold fight when it's appropriate. Let's talk about Damian Maia. He proves once again the old man can do it, 38 years young. They keep throwing. He makes a good point up there. He says they give me Neil Magny. They say, you know, beat this young guy, beat that young guy. I keep beating all the young guys. Ryan LaFleur a few months back, and now everyone wanted Gunnar Nelson, and he beat him on the ground. He beat him at his own game. That, to me, was one of Maia's most impressive performances in the UFC. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, he basically drowned Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah.
That looked like the most hellacious experience to go through for Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah.
Like, his face after the first round when he walked back to his corner was just one of utter, like, he had no idea what just hit him. Like, I can't imagine how horrible that experience must have been. But it's interesting because it doesn't really move Damian Maia up that much, because it's exactly what he's saying. He keeps fighting these guys lower ranked, these up and comers, and he's beating them. He's beating them convincingly, but he's not getting a chance at the Johnny Hendricks or the Tyron Woodleys of the
That's
world.
the fight. That's the one. Tyron Woodley. That's the one that he should get.
I agree with you 100%. I would love to see that fight.
You know, it's the fight that makes sense. I know Woodley wants that title shot, but you know, is he going to wait all this time? That's the fight that makes sense.
Well, that's an easy solution. I mean, and it's a very intriguing fight. Obviously,
Yes.
You've got a good wrestler and a striker against a guy who's a good grappler and can strike too, a little subtly, like he's very good at. I would be perfectly happy with that fight.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Gunnar, I still think, needs to kind of put it all together. But afterwards, Damian Maia, when I was talking to him and saying, wow, I mean, that was so dominant, he was glowing about just how tough Nelson was. I mean, Nelson was beat up and kept on going.
With Nelson, I agree with what you're saying. It was almost like you could tell. You remember when Esparza was getting outclassed in her fight with Jędrzejczyk, and you sort of thought, she knows she has nothing to offer this fight, but she's going to have to just keep going out there and figuring it out. And that sort of had the feel to me. It was after the grappling became very one-sided, then it was clear that Maia was just going to be superior in every position and like just keep it going. You had to feel for him a little bit, because you're like, okay, is he going to stand with him now? Is he going to try to do something else? And he just couldn't figure out anything to do.
Also, tonight on the main card, Max Holloway picking up a big win over Jeremy Stephens and going on a tremendous rant afterwards, asking for a McGregor rematch in Croke Park, asking for a fight against Frankie Edgar in Hawaii. He just
one back for BJ.
I love that he said that. He just took that mic and ran with it. It was a great moment for Max Holloway. And the other big news, I thought, Uriah Faber with a dominant win over Frankie Saenz, and then really selling either a fight against TJ, who he says he can't relate to, or the quote-unquote dope Dominic Cruz. So Uriah Faber has 18 lives. The guy continues to remain a factor in that bantamweight title picture, so congratulations to him. All right, let's wrap this up. It's been an unbelievable week. You've been here since Monday. We've been here since Tuesday. We've been doing these every single night. I don't even know what day it is today. We're going back home. Something like that. Final impressions of a historic weekend for the UFC. We've never seen this before.
The whole weekend was cool. I think the whole we were talking about at the beginning, the prospects, the contenders to the champions. It really worked out well. It seemed like there was a real culmination.
Yeah.
But my ultimate takeaway is, man, you just saw a guy beat the greatest featherweight who ever lived in 13 seconds. Unbelievable.
And he called it.
Yeah.
Your biggest impression, any takeaways?
I just thought it went pretty smoothly, honestly. Yeah. And there were so many people here, so many of the champions, so many of the media. It was just like everybody was here. Like you mentioned, it sort of having a Super Bowl feel. It really had that. It was like just about everybody was here, it felt like, in one place. So it felt like it's a big concentration of everybody sort of celebrating in the game a little bit. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, as I go back and think about this, I think the McGregor knockout is going to remain there more than about all of, everything else, just given the magnitude of it being such a big event. And realistically, between 193 and 194, I mean, if you sort of like just look at those two combined, you're just like, well, this is how crazy. Like you get two finishes like that, and I think this would be the only thing that would sort of have come up and give that a run for its money. So that's going to be the thing that I remember most.
People win and people lose, but I think in the end, this really was a grand slam for the UFC. Oh, yeah. 3 straight nights, sold-out shows. You consider the fact that a very marketable Rose Namajunas won in dominant fashion. Paige will be back, and I think her stock rose after that loss as well. Sage Northcutt, tremendous win for him.
He's even in the conversation, but he is.
It's crazy that feels like it was like 10 years ago at this point. And then when you look on Friday, Frankie, huge win for him, career-defining win, and then also Tony Ferguson with a big win. And then you see what happened tonight. I mean, the $10.1 million gate, this was a huge, huge weekend for the UFC, a historic one in what is shaping up to be maybe their best year ever from, story standpoint, results standpoint, and a business standpoint as well. But in the end, the man who we were first really introduced to as far as the UFC is concerned in April of 2013, who came on the scene and asked Dana White for 50 G's. All he wanted was some new suits, maybe a pocket square or two, a pocket watch as well, a new car. Now look at him. What can you say about Conor McGregor? It seemed like it took everyone so long to jump on his bandwagon. He was cocky, he was braggadocious, he was somewhat arrogant, but he kept calling his shots and telling people that he just predicts these things. And he predicted it. He predicted it. He called it. Conor McGregor is the new UFC undisputed featherweight champion. He did it in 13 seconds. I hate to say I told you so, but anyway, I'll let you guys figure that one out for yourself. Thank you so much for watching our coverage all week long from here in Las Vegas. We had a blast. Hope you had a blast as well. The MMA Hour is back for our final show on Monday. It should be a lot of fun. And then Chuck and I are headed to Disney World.
Right back out. Here we go again.
The Magic Kingdom, baby. Final UFC show of the year. That's in 1 week's time in Orlando. For now, we say goodnight. Again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Monday.